Ask the Podcast Coach for October 6th, 2018.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that fun-filled music. It is Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I am Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and keeping the lovely Jim Cullison's chair warm this week is one of my favorite people on the planet. You know him from She Podcast. You know him from HateToWait.com. And you should know him from AudioEditingSolutions.com. The one and only John Bukenas. How's it going, buddy?
Wow. I got goosebumps for that introduction. I actually have goosebumps. That's no lie. Thank you very much, Dave. It's a bucket list item to be here.
It's you're the thing I love about John is especially we got to hang out at Podcast Mid-Atlantic is you have opinions. You know, I thought about that. I'm like, I gotta find somebody who's able to talk, and you work a lot with podcasters at Audio Editing Solutions. You know a lot of podcasters. You are do you get to, are you still in the She Podcast Facebook group? Or I know at one point we were both in there.
I got booted out with you because we stand to pee. So we can't be in there, but I'm in the super special group.
Yes, so am I.
Yes, I'm there, but the real group we're not allowed in. Jessica let a guy in one time by accident because I don't know, his name might have been Heather or Hunter or something. And the guy immediately went in there and started mansplaining, and they booted him out. Like, dude, you had a chance. You could have represented us all. Just prove their point.
I'm always tempted. Like, does Facebook let you make, like, can I be Heather Jackson or something? Or, you know,
I used to be able to, not now. After that whole debacle with the election and everything, they really clamped down. You're not even allowed to use nicknames. Like if you had a nickname, they come after you. So yes, it's very serious now.
Well, if you have a question, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join and actually pop right in here. And if you're like, oh, I don't want to pop in right now, I'm in my jammies. You can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/live, and we have quite a few people hanging out today, and you can ask your question over there. But I did find something this morning. Have you ever saved a post in Facebook? Like you come across something and you're like, oh, I should save this.
Accidentally, I think I have, but I don't know where they go.
That's what I was like this morning. I was like, okay, I just saved it because I wanted to refer to something, and I'm like, okay, I saved it. I found out if you go to facebook.com/save, you can see all of your stuff. Now, what's weird is I couldn't find a link to that in my profile or anything. I just happened to, I saved something else and it said, oh, you've saved like 2 things this week. Click here to see them. And I went and I'm like, oh, okay, I did that. And there it was. So if you ever are looking for something and you're like, hey, wait, where did that go to again? And I'm going to double check here just to make sure I'm not lying, because there was some fun stuff happening. You know what? I lied apparently, because I went to save facebook.com/ is it save duh? Saved, not save. Saved, SAVED. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But the one thing, and I will talk about this, that I thought was interesting, and that's, see, I was all set, and now I'm not. Where'd the one go? There was a post about, and this is the question of the month, by the way, at the School of Podcasting, is, have you ever discovered and listened to a new podcast because of some sort of little video with the little squiggly lines? What is the official, do we have an official term for that? An audiogram. Have you ever discovered something because of an audiogram? And what's interesting is I saved the Facebook post and it won't take me to the saved Facebook post. It will only take me to the post that the Facebook post was talking about, which is kind of odd. I'm like, oh, I want to go back to the actual discussion in Facebook. And instead, it's taking me over to podcastinginsights.com, which I can go ahead and throw in the chat room. But the interesting thing is, I'll go ahead and say what it was talking about, is Podfader, Jay Soderbergh basically said, hey, that's because they said, hey, you can get 5 times the listens with an audiogram. And so Jay, being a podcaster, kind of went, wow, that's kind of a bold statement. Like, how you proving that? And I kind of went, well, that's why it says up to 5 times. And there are so, yeah, and there are so many things that can play with, how you get downloads. And so basically they kind of, and Jay politely said, oh, so this is just basically, I'm paraphrasing, marketing crap.
There you go.
Because, and so, have you ever, I see them all the time.
I
And
do click on them. I click on them because I want to. I guess I click on them for information. I want to see how they sound. What are they actually? What did they pull? Would it make me go there? But I love listening to new podcasts. So if someone says, "Hey, I have a new podcast and I want you to check it out," I will go listen to their latest episode, and I kind of do my own personal podcast rodeo show to see how long I can hang in there. I've also found really good podcasts by doing that. So, I mean, it's not a bad idea. And I like the idea that you can hear the voices and listen to a little bit of the content before you go over. So I like the idea. I know a lot of people that do use them on a, they do it on Twitter, Facebook, and I think Instagram, you can actually use them too.
yeah, most of them, I know Wave and Headliner, they give you the ability to send this to your phone where you then save it to your videos or whatever. And from there, you can then send it to Instagram. So, because Instagram doesn't let you post from anything but Instagram, and you can't do it from Instagram on your desktop. It's got to be from your phone. And so I did find finally a way to share I found the post. If you're in Facebook, you have to click on whatever the person's name is that does that. So she says, yeah, that's what's the good old up to 5 times in the title. Therefore, it depends on so many factors. I can't promise that people will listen because I can't control if your content is quality. That's a polite way of saying, I don't know if you suck or not. If your art is bomb, if you're sharing the way you should, what I can say is if you're crushing on all aspects, then these items in the article should all heavily increase the traffic and their stats to back it. To which I go, wait, if your show's good, then we can show where you're going to get more traffic. To which I still say, well, how do you track it back to, the audiogram? And that's what Jay says, but your stats are meaningless. They're empty. So I love the fact that he kind of held back on that. You have some success stories to tell, but don't count your non-success stories and point to the other factors why it failed. So it's an empty marketing claim. So I thought that was it's always fun kind of seeing people just politely
That's true. I'm not that polite when I say stuff like that. I'm very direct. I don't know why that is, but I'm very direct when I ask people questions like that. And the other thing was when you read the response, there was like so many markety words in her response. If you're already crushing it, all those words that they use
right.
for that. To me, I think a lot of times we as podcasters, we market to the same people all the time. It's okay. We've hit these people. How do we get to the people that we don't know? Because everybody we follow. So I guess that's where like all the hashtag Podern family, where other podcasters see your stuff and then they share it to their audience, and then at that point, then maybe somebody will click on it and come over. But again, that's the hardest part about podcasting is getting someone to press play.
Yeah, what's interesting for me is with audiograms, I'm usually seeing somebody that I'm already listening to. Like if they're posting that to their social, well, I'm probably following you on social because I listen to your podcast. So it's just like a cool, fun way to let me know there's a new episode out there. So that'll be interesting. So yeah, if you have an opinion, it's an easy yes or no question. Have you ever discovered a new podcast by listening to an audiogram? Just go over to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact. And I need that answer by the 26th of October 2017. So the other thing we should probably talk a smidge about is this is from, oh, this is going to be fun. It's fun listening to Dave butcher names. Sofkat. Hagarki. Close enough. We're just going to call him Softy. He or she. Good morning. This is a podcast launch question. I'm starting a new podcast called Secret Dinosaur Cult, which to me sounds like a great name for a band as well. And we're about to upload it to iTunes. In terms of author name, I'm not sure what to put. Do I put Secret Dinosaur Cult or both our names, Sophie Hagen and Jody Mitchell, which is interesting because that's not the name in Facebook where I copied this from, or Sophie Hagen and then the ampersand Jody Mitchell, or do I put the name of my company, which produces it? I would like for it to pop up if anyone searches for either of our names in their podcast apps. Speaking of which, when you do search for something, where does the search happen? In your name, your author name, general show description, or in the episodes? My question is, if I, in the show description, mention my other podcast, when people then search for my podcast, will they then find my new one? I hope that makes sense. And thanks in advance. So the reason I bring this up is we talked about this on the Podcasters Roundtable the other night. And basically, it's almost coming to the point where you're like, I don't know that you want to rely on Apple search, because what the answer to the question is, what do you put in the author name? Your name. Now, there are some people that have networks that if you want, you can put your network name in there. What you don't want to put in there at all is keywords. So like John could put John Bukenas, comma, audio editor, comma, producer, comma, podcast producer, comma, I don't know. Podcast listener. No, John Bukenas is the author name. And this goes for the title of your podcast. So like, for instance, mine used to be School of Podcasting. And then it said, learn to podcast, comma, whatever, comma, blah, blah, blah. And now it's just School of Podcasting is the name of the show. This one is now Ask the Podcast Coach. And so what it searches is the name of your show, the author tag, and the name of your titles. It does not, to the best of my knowledge, search the description. And so I had 7 shows on Thursday and here's the interesting thing, to the best of my knowledge, they didn't say, but it sure sounds like the way they're acting, they got 0, like no notice. And what was interesting is also on Thursday, and this has been solved, in some cases, your podcast listing in Apple wouldn't show any of your episodes. So people are like, hey, I'm not in iTunes. And I would say, oh, it's a glitch. Apple's working on it. And they would go, no, I'm not in Apple Podcast or iTunes. And I would click on their link and it would just say, this show is not available in the US. So
yikes. I had that happen on a couple shows. Now I know why. I know why. Okay. So I get in trouble because I don't bow at the foot of iTunes and Apple Podcasts. I get in trouble for this because I know they've done so much for podcasting, and I get that. But now they're going the other way, where they're becoming how about telling us the rules, number one, and how about just giving us a little warning? Hey, if you don't change your title in 14 days, we're going to remove you, or just something. A tap on the shoulder, a little nudge.
Well, here's the thing, and Emily brought up in the chat room, the sales whisperer. This guy actually has Zig Ziglar. We always joke about that because Zig's been dead for like 3 years. The sales whisperer is a great example of he's just saying, go ahead. You want to kick me out? Here I am. Come get me. He's literally just saying, I dare you. You know, I got you. I got your keyword right here, Apple. It's amazing that this guy is still there. And so I don't know how he is. I don't know what the criteria is. But if you want to see an example, at least right now, while he's still there on October 6th, the sales whisperer is a pretty bad example of here's how to get kicked out of Apple. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. But the problem is the sales whisperer is not listening to this show, as is they're all listening to marketing shows because that's what they're into. I mean, I listen to a bunch of podcasts about podcasting because, well, that's what I'm into. And so if I was into marketing or crocheting or whatever, NASCAR, I'd be listening. And you know, the Turn Left show, all about podcasting, is not talking about, hey, you better not have any keywords in your author or your title You know, or here's another one. I'm pretty sure I had one that was kicked out because they were obviously explicit, like obviously explicit, and they were not marked explicit.
I understand that.
Yeah, so that one's kind of like, come on,
Really,
come on.
you can't yell. You can't. It's right there. It tells you explicit. Okay, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But the fact that with the keywords and the titles, I mean, some of it was ridiculous. Some of it was marketers ruining everything because that's what they do. So
Yes, they do.
I just, like I said, they're always looking for that edge. They're always looking for that, one-upmanship thing. And I understand that. But now they're telling you you can't. But then again, it's like, okay, now we need a directory where we can have these searches. And there's not one out there right now, unless Google Podcasts will allow us to do some of this.
Well, that's my thing. I thought, so what's going to happen now is because Daniel J. Lewis had a great point. You know, he had a show for the TV show Lost, or not Lost, once. That was Cliff. Yeah. And so he couldn't really kind of put the name of the show in there, but he did as a tagline. You know, it was like, I forget the name. What was the name of a show? Once Podcast?
It was the Once Podcast.
Yeah. And then it was like the unofficial blah, blah, blah.
SP.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Stargate Pioneer has one for Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's the name of the show, and then it's an unofficial podcast of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., et cetera, et cetera. So those kind of taglines help. And if we're not allowed to have those, then search is going to really stink, which already it's not great. And to their credit, when you're searching probably close to 600,000 shows now, it's hard to find results, especially if you only show the top, meaning I don't know what that means, 300 results. So there are times when people go, look, I just typed in the name of my show and it doesn't come up at all, but I know I'm there because if I search for my name, I'm there. And that's where you kind of go, welcome to Apple Podcasts. Congratulations. That's why you don't send people and say, find me in iTunes, because that's like one of the worst things you could say. An example of somebody that got spammed, and I'm not gonna say their name here, but it was like, I'll just put my name in there. Let's say my author field. Remember, this is the author field. Said Dave Jackson, multifamily real estate investing, apartment investing, cash flow, buying apartment buildings, commercial real estate investing, learn to buy real estate, multifamily. But wait, there's more. Entrepreneur, expect advice similar to Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, Entrepreneur on Fire, and Jim Cramer, but for real estate investors. Banhammer. Yeah, that's obvious. But I had some this week that were not that obvious. One was like a camera show, and it was something that wasn't super obvious. And then they were like photography, something, 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 something. And it wasn't like super spammy. It was, again, just kind of describing that. So you made a good point. So if Apple search is not great now, partly because they've got such a huge database and partly because we're restricting how we can be found, who does search really good? And that's where I'm like, if I'm Google, I'm jumping all over this and making their app easy to find everybody, which it sounds kind of like they're on the right track. The problem is they're finding stuff they're not supposed to find. When the guy was on the New Media Show and he said they had 2 million podcasts in the app, we're like, excuse me?
Wow.
Yeah. And he said, because at the time we were saying 550,000 titles in Apple, and what they're doing, and people are not happy about this, is Google found all these RSS feeds where people are doing security through obscurity, where it's not really password protected, but it's through a page that there's no link to.
Okay.
And then Google would find it and go, okay, here's another RSS feed. It's a podcast. Throw it in here. And people are like, hey, people have to pay for that. And you're like, oh, well.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry.
Well, okay. So I had $1 million idea the other day on She Podcast, as I thought I did. And someone like Daniel J. Lewis or somebody that was way smarter than I am, if they decided one day to just make a new directory and call it, I don't know, podcast directory, and then had the whole directory like Apple Podcasts, but to be in this directory, it costs you $60 per year. $60, $5 a month for the price of a cup of coffee. And your title will be searchable, your author will be searchable, your description could be searchable, and you can have 5 keywords. There you go. Would people do it? And podcasters would be like, yeah, you know what? I'm not paying for that. I'll go over here where they can't search for my podcast at all.
Well, and it made me flash way back, because when I first started podcasting, there was no Apple iTunes. And so people had to use, and I don't expect people to use RSS feeds, but I think for me, I'm just going to, and that brings up another question. Since this fits in very nicely. Man, this was a great question. From Dan. It's time to butcher names Saturday. I'm gonna say the V is silent. Lefebvre? Ellie, it's Febvre. Fevre, probably silent B. Fevre. Daniel says almost every podcaster tells their audience to subscribe. He says, but I'm curious, as a listener, do you ever subscribe to a podcast because the host asked you to? And I went,
no,
never have. And I went, wow, that's a really good point, because we beg people like, hey, if write and review me and blah, blah, blah. I could, if you're not worth a review, asking me to do it is not going to do it. And that one, I was like, that's a really good point. Because if I don't like your show and you go, hey, if you go over to mywebsite.com/subscribe, I'm like, yeah, not going to happen. And I was like, wow, that's a really good point. Because I just listened to a show where somebody said there's an interesting Facebook group that's kind of anti podcast expert. Like, podcast expert over there is a bad word. Like, oh, you're one of those gurus. And they said, doggone it, I use a microphone and I know which one it was. You're right. This little lovely Blue Yeti. And I put it on a table and record multiple people. And it's not, nobody's, telling me anything about it. I'm like, yeah, because like when you go to a restaurant and people go, how was everything? And you're thinking in your head, awful. The waiter or waitress was rude. I had to wait forever for my food. And then when I got it, it was cold. And instead you look at the person at the register and you go, fine. And then you never come back.
Right.
So,
it's like, how many people will tell you that you have toilet paper stuck to your shoe while you're walking around a public area? Only your really good friends will tell you,
right.
Hey, you got some toilet paper stuck on your shoe. All right. No one will tell you this. They won't tell you when it's bad. And then if they did, you probably wouldn't believe them. But I see that all the time. I mean, you get and they send you this file and they say, can you make this sound better? And I went, no. But if you get a couple more mics, I can make you sound better. But this is hot garbage. And there's not much I can do with this. It's going to sound like you're in a bus terminal. I mean, I understand that.
Bus terminal.
What is the name of this? I don't know if you could say the name of it, but
Yeah,
it would be like Run Amok Podcasting Facebook group, like where we're just going to run.
It was Underdog.
I
think was the name of it. And it was actually, there were some really good questions in there. And I tried not to go in and mansplain. Like somebody said, okay, doggone it, for like, what's the difference between these microphones and why do I care? Then I'm like, okay, there's one dynamic. And I said, the quick answer is don't buy a condenser, but here's what they do. And I even said, technically condenser microphones don't pick up more, but they pick up more bass and they pick up more treble. And just for me, the test I've done, I have a couple, and I will set a dynamic so that when I'm talking, it's going up to -12. And I'll take a condenser, plug it into the same mixer, and set it up so when I talk into it, I'm at -12. And then I will basically not say a thing and turn on the dynamic, and I don't hear a whole lot of background noise. And then I will turn on the condenser, and I hear a lot more I hear a lot more background noise. So I know in theory they don't, technically they don't pick up more background noise, but in my test they did at the same level. So maybe it's more whatever they call it, rear rejection or things like that. But so I explained that, and then somebody said, like, what is a mixer and why do I need one? So it's actually a really cool group because it appears to be people that are just starting out. And I said, well, let's say you talk really, really loud and you have a co-host who talks like this. I go, well, you're going to have to boost them and you're going to have to cut you back. And that's where you're mixing the audio levels so that the audio level coming out is nice and consistent. Because if you're audience while they're driving their car has to keep grabbing the volume knob. For me, that's a deal breaker. You get one knob turn, and if I have to turn it twice, done. I eject.
All
Yeah.
right. So, knowing you, Dave Jackson, knowing you, the person that you are, you want to charge into this group and like help everyone because that's how you are.
Yeah.
Are you getting any pushback because you are an expert and they are not a fan of an expert?
So far, not. I guess Emily's letting me know that the two moderators are actually friends of mine, apparently.
Oh,
So I did not know that. So I just walked in and I was like, because the one was like, who would even call themselves an expert? So I went over to dictionary.com and I'm like, here's what an expert is: somebody who has knowledge of a specific topic. And I'm like, is that really such a bad thing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't want to. I guess I'm a podcast expert. Shh,
oh,
don't tell anybody.
sure.
So,
All right. So, okay. So they're in there for advice from who? If they don't want it from an expert,
yeah, that
from
was
another guy doing it wrong.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So, but here's the other thing. On the other hand, the person that was recording with one microphone sounds like she's having a blast. And I was like, you know what? Do it. Keep doing that. Have a lot of fun. You could sound better if you wanted to, but you know, the other thing you have to be careful with, we just did some math before we started recording today. Monthly stats don't mean squat. Because if I say the School of Podcasting gets 21,000 downloads, you do the math in your head and you go, wait a minute, he does 4 episodes a month. That's 5,000 downloads an episode. Holy crap. Well, guess what? We did the math. I think it was 51% of my downloads, if not a little more, are my back catalog, which is easy. I actually looked a show from 14 years ago, 2005, 13 years, gets 8 downloads. I've had 8 downloads in October of my very first episode. So now when you multiply that by whatever I'm at, 638, that adds up. So monthly downloads don't really mean squat, because if I'm an advertiser and you say I get 21,000 downloads a month, your ad isn't going into, only whatever 8,000 of that, maybe 9,000 of that is going to actually have your ad. The other, 12,000, it's my back catalog. Your ad's not in that. So you have to quote the number. The one that advertisers are usually interested in is the total number of downloads per episode after 30 days. So,
the other thing that podcasts are starting to do now is sell the audience of their social media. So in other words, if I have 12,000 people on Twitter, then we'll put your ad in my podcast, but then we'll also give you a tweet once a week, using our social media. So then you sell to that audience too. And there's a lot of people that I follow on Twitter that I consider friends, and I see them all the time, but I don't listen to their podcast because it's stuff that I'm not interested in. They're gamers and they're comic book guys and stuff like that. It's just not my cup of tea. I mean, they have great podcasts. It's just not what I'm interested in. I follow them on social media, so I do see those ads. I don't know. It's just another way of looking at, your total audience versus your podcast audience. And I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert. We talk about this on She Podcast, which comes out Monday.
ooh, look at you.
I know.
With the teaser.
With
Your big tease.
Yeah, with that's October 8th. And we talk about this because I kind of disagree with the ladies, where I say I look at downloads, not like everybody looks at download, like I don't obsess over it, but that's how I consider whether my podcast is growing, by my downloads. Because even if everybody comes in on social media, I still want them to listen to my podcast. And they say, well, no, that's not all you want. I'm like, it's not. And they're like, no. And I'm like, I think it is. So we kind of get into that little back and forth. But so for me, I think downloads will measure your audience, but that's not the only measure of your audience or your influence. So I don't know. It's something that I think that can help podcasters draw from.
Yeah, I know Jess is all about that. Advertisers want to know how many people you have on Twitter and especially your email list and Facebook and Instagram. And like Instagram, I'm on Instagram, but I really shouldn't be. I think I have 4 posts, and like one of them is a picture of my car in the snow. It's like, what? I'm like, like somebody the other day said, go over to Instagram and slide up and DM me. And I went over to Instagram and I just felt so old. I felt like grandpa trying to play video games. I'm like, okay, I'm on the Graham book. What's the face trigger snap? And I'm sliding on it, and I could not figure out how to DM this person. I was like,
Hey,
all right.
I need to PM my Instagram people, and I can't seem to. How do I do this?
Yeah. But going back to the Underdog podcast Facebook group, first of all, the other thing that made me step back, I'm like, wait a minute, if people don't want to ask gurus, instead of, like putting it on them, I go, wait a minute, maybe the gurus are answering the question. Like you said, the one guy that snuck into the She podcast group went in and started mansplaining. I really need to get a grasp on what mansplaining is. I don't quite, besides stupid things like, hey, my car won't start. Is there any gas in it? You know what I mean? I mean, that's, but
There's
there,
flow chart that tells you. Did they ask you? No. Did you tell them anyhow? Yes. That's mansplaining.
See, that's not fair, because
I know.
because by default, men love to fix stuff. That's one of the hardest things I had to learn when I was in marriage counseling. Is my wife would go on these just rants about her job or whatever, and I'd be like, well, maybe you should talk to your manager. And the counselor's like, no, don't say a thing. And I'm like, wait, what? My wife is hurting. She's upset about this. I'm like, yeah, just trust me. Just shut up, nod your head, and go, oh man, that must be frustrating. Yeah, just, and I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah, they don't want you to fix it. They just want you to listen. I'm like, really? I was like, because in the man head, you're like, wait, because if I go to a guy and go, I don't know, man, I can't get the car to do this and that, the guy's going, oh, did you Jimmy the thing with the, just try that. And, hey, thanks. It's cool. And apparently all men talk like they're from New York or Jersey or whatever horrible, weird accent I just made up.
That might have been Jersey. So for me, being part of the She podcast, I struggle with that because I don't want to mansplain, but then, okay, so then you have to try to figure out, and you probably do this as a teacher, you have to figure out what level of knowledge they have so you can explain to them so they understand. I could talk to you about podcasting differently than I would talk to somebody brand new. So I have to try to mostly ask questions and then try to answer. So that's the hardest part. Even guys, when you try to explain stuff to guys, you can talk way over their heads. And for me, it's the hardest part, because I have people, you, Daniel, Jay Lewis, and all, they'll say something to me, and I'm like, all right, can you bring that down a few levels? Because I'm not getting it.
Well, I do a thing it's called the Northeast Ohio Podcasters Meetup. And it's fun on occasion where somebody will come in, they're brand new to podcasting, and they'll talk like, how much storage do I need? I'm like, well, it depends on how long your podcast is going to be, and then how often you're going to podcast, and then what bit rate you are going to go on. So if it's 64 mono, then it's then. If it's 128, and all of a sudden you just see them going, okay, I have no idea.
The eyes blaze up.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. So then you got to go back. And so you have a great point. I think that's, it's a unintentional problem, is we come in spewing bit rates, and we need to go back to the paintbrush analogy or something to explain that, bit rate is like putting more paint on your brush, and the more paint on your brush, the better it's going to coat. And if you have more bit rates in your audio, then it's going to sound better because there's more sound, it's a better reproduction of your whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So
for me, I get that, but I don't, the stuff after the number, I forget. So in other words, it's 44.1, whatever, and 16 bit, I think. And then 64, there's a K in there. That's how I do it. But I know it when I see it, but I can't remember it to tell people.
Yeah. Ryan says, don't explain the "it depends" part. Just ask them the questions and give them the answer. That is the other fun part of podcasting. There's so much stuff like, do I need a mixer?
Depends.
It depends. It's like,
what are you doing?
And then
how are you doing your podcast? Because I think a lot of people now can go, instead of using a mixer, go with an see, now I can't think of it.
I'm trying.
I did it to you now.
It's this. You want one of these?
You want one of these? The Focusrite. What is that?
This is a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2.
But it is an audio interface. There
Thank you.
I need a winner. I need a winner. Where's my soundboard. I need the winner's belt. See, this is why I can't be a podcast consultant, because I'm like, I just did the thing with the thing that you put in the thing.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah, that always works. Well, speaking about the thing of the thing and a safe place where people can hang out, that would be our awesome, fun-filled, awesome supporters. And being that it's the first of the month, we thank all of them. Now, here's the fun thing, and this is why I think everybody, when you start out podcasting, should edit your own show at least once and then give it to John, because when I do this section, and I'm going to do my best. Now, you hear me saying, don't do this. I say, like nobody's business when I do this segment. I don't know why. I think because I don't know the next slide coming up, because I could, if I wanted to. I have, well, here, I only do this behind the scenes. Somewhere in PowerPoint, I have a slide that shows me what the next slide. I can't find it. It's the whole teacher version, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I'm going to try not to myself to death. So it takes me 20 minutes to edit this section of the podcast. Josh Liston from onthebubblepodcast.com, Greg from debtshepherd.com, where he teaches financial wellness, Jonathan Bloom, Be Great Today. It's weekly inspiration. Find it at weeklyawesome.com. Glenn the Geek Hebert, who will be on a future episode of the School of Podcasting, all about starting a podcast network. You can find him at horseradionetwork.com. Josh Rivers from podcastingexperiments.com. Max Trescott from aviationnewstalk.com. Shane from spybrary.com. Military Money Movement. You can find that at as in MIL, moneymovement.com/podcast. My buddy Ronsley over at Amplify Media Group. Find him at mustamplify.com. And then our $10 patrons, we have Jeffrey Hallish from Podnuts. Find that at PODNUTZ. Nick Suberling from CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. Sean Park from BeYourOwnNerd.com. Barry Kessler from BarryKessler.com. I did just catch myself once. Matthew does a Scottish podcast. Illiquity from TravelGlutenFree.com. Corey Finneran from IVNV.com. Jay Cleveland Payne from JClevelandPayne.net. Jason E. Curtis from CUATX.com. Jeremy Dennis from TransmissionsPodcast.com. Jim Collison. Have you ever heard of that guy, John?
Yes.
Okay. From TheAverageGuy.tv. There's one. Joe Solsi from StackingBenjamins.com. Joe Taylor from OnFaceEdge.com. Kim Slusher from DistractedLife.com. Michael Ray. Thank you so much, buddy. And did I skip a page there? I did. Wait, go backwards. Hold on. Yeah, we did that page. Okay. Master Cauldron from cauldronscrypt.com. Rob Griffiths from, you can basically find his stuff at bedtime.fm. If you add a /storytime or /peace out, you'll find his show. Troy Heinrichs from the blacklistexposed.com. Carrie Bond from bonfirestudio.com. Matthew from scottishpodcast.com. I think he just got 2 shout outs now. I'll have to check that. Or we have 2 Scottish podcasters. Michael Delaney, easy for me to say. Now, the show is called Caregivers for Dementia. You can find him at babymountainradio.com. He's a new patron. So, Michael, thank you so much. Chris Hollifield, another new one. IamSaltLake.com. What's cool is Chris actually has a billboard out that says IamSaltLake.com. I saw that. Ed Ryan from podcasting-for-radio-dummies.com. Just listened to that this morning. Ross Brand from livestreaminguniverse.com. Ryan P. Jackson from myperfectpodcast.com. Next page. Page 2. Adam Higgins from Odd Dad Out at oddadoutpodcast.com. Anthony over at Route 66 Podcast. If you're thinking of doing the old travel down Route 66, it's a really good podcast. The Audio Dice Network at audiodice.net. Barb at anchor.fm/barbtusa. Sean at clarinet.com. That's all about the clarinet. Creepy Kingdom at, you guessed it, creepykingdom.com. David Wilson from Ottawa Works. Diane Lane. You know, I got to tell you, I might have to do her next week. That sounds weird. I might have to mention her podcast next week because I think she sent it to me. Emily Prokop from thestorybehindpodcast.com. If you haven't bought the book yet, You got to get it. I watched Emily's unboxing of her book. It was awesome. So congratulations on that. It comes out very, very soon. I think it's next week. Garrett Godfrey from utrmedia.org. That's a new one. He used to do the Mr. Robot podcast, and now he's kind of rebranded that to utrmedia.org. Gary and Margaret over at beekeepingpodcast.com. Craig from Ingleus Podcast. The International Latin Podcast Awards at latinpodcastawards.com. Jason Griffin from tvtimes3.com, and that is THREE.com. Jay Poole from Pots. Okay, I got to get this right. Potstirrerpodcast.com. Lucas from triangletactical.net. Mike Moody. This is another new one. You can find it at lowcutpod.com. It's a podcast about the art of podcasting. I was checking that out last night. At least as of October 6th, there's nothing there yet. But hey, when you listen to this, there might be. So check it out at lowcutpod.com. Paul at fightingthroughpodcast.co.uk. Patrick Keller at I'm going to blow that one. Big Seance podcast.com. Brandon over at seahawkerspodcast.com. Sean at Slept In. It's government class, but if you just go to sleptinclass.com. Steve Sleeper, the one and only Steve from earn.show. Wayne Henderson, the voice of the Packers Fan podcast. You can find him at mediavoiceovers.com. And last but not least, Chris and Brandon from Florida Focus Podcast.libsyn.com. So if you would like to be an awesome supporter, please go out to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. It is all deeply, deeply appreciated. And the other thing, because we have a fair number of people on there, as long as we stay above 300, we do a live Q&A for just patrons. So that means, Dave, does that mean you could sign up for $1 and have an hour of open Q&A consulting with Dave Jackson? Yes, it does. So askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. I need oxygen when we're done with that.
Okay. Well, so I was looking at what you said, and you said you looked for Mike Mooney's podcast and it wasn't there yet. But the funny thing is, because now I'm tuned into this, it says Mike, the podcast is Low Cut, a podcast about blah, whatever. Could he have been taken down?
If somebody asked me, should I do that? I would go, not right now.
Oh, not now. I would not. That's as soon as I saw that, I was like, that might get taken down.
Yeah. Is there does he have a podcast up yet? It's Low Cut Pod, right? Low Cut.
That Low Cut a podcast.
That's what he told me to do it. Yeah, he's not in Apple Podcast yet. Let me let's get our geek on, shall we? Sure. This is fun. If you've ever clicked on an RSS feed and you go, hey, my RSS feed is broke because when I clicked on it, I got a face full of code, which if you're watching the video right now, we have a face full of code. And this is what an RSS feed is. Yay. And in here is a title, and his is Low Cut, the art of podcasting. Now, see, to me, this is a great example. To me, that's kind of not keyword stuffing. He's explaining because to me, when I hear Low Cut, I'm thinking it's a show about cleavage
or lawn maintenance.
There you go. And so he kind of needs that. And if it was me, I would just call it the art of podcasting, because I don't even quite understand how Low Cut ties into that.
No, I have no idea.
I'm titles
mean a lot. That's, but then again, listen, I had a podcast called the Brand X Podcast. And I mean, you can't get more basic in not knowing what the podcast is about by that title. So I can't speak to this thing.
See, I would think that show's about marketing.
Right. And if you click on, you'll be shocked because
it was not about marketing.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Well, tell us about, you're on Hate to Wait. Tell us about that podcast.
So when two podcasters have a similar thing that they're going through, a similar interest, what do? We start a podcast. So Emily Prokop, who is a friend of mine and a podcasting mentor, she is fabulous. She started intermittent fasting, and then we started talking about it, and I was trying to lose weight, and then we said, we should start a podcast. And then what we did was we decided to start a podcast, not to tell everybody how to lose weight, but the support you need when you're trying to lose weight. it's different when you have a lot of weight to lose than if you're trying to get the last 10 pounds off so you look better in your bikini. So we're in there and we're going through the struggles of what it takes to stay on plan. Now, let's see, episode 24 is coming out Monday. And right now I'm down 32 pounds in 24 weeks. Now I know myself, this has been a struggle because you keep starting and stopping and you get frustrated, but I know that I have to come back and podcast and tell them I have to step on that scale and tell people. So it has kept me motivated and also made me think about podcasting. Like when I first started podcasting, I didn't just become a podcaster and everything worked out. There's a lot of failure and there's a lot of testing. And this is the same thing. So we're just going through it. We're having a lot of fun. We have not a secret. We have a private Facebook group, hatetowait.com/Facebook. You can go to and come in and just, it's a safe zone where you can talk about, I did this or I did that. And then you're in there, which is,
I'm in there. Yeah. And I attribute you guys partly to my success because it's like a support group. And this is what podcasting does. It gives you a community. And I was very happy because I stepped on the scale today. And for the first time in a long time, I am now under 215. I could not get under the two. I thought I was hitting a plateau and I stepped on it today. I was 214.4.
There you go.
Like, there we go. So, but I feel like I'm in it, like almost like it's a support group. And I'm like, hey, John's being consistent. He's lost weight like the last 3 episodes, because when you guys do the weigh-in, I look at my phone and go, if I had to weigh in right now, I am not down. Okay. I would be, so
one weekend I had a friend come over and I didn't diet at all. And we went and had cheesesteaks and pizza and all that. And I had to come in the next week and tell everybody I gained 10 pounds. So that was right. But if you're in our Facebook group, we have Winning Wednesdays, and if you tell us what you win, you get one of these.
There we go.
There you go.
And we just, as of right now, can you hit that one more time for me, John? We would like to welcome a new $5 patron to the group, one Kyle Bondo from Merchants of Dirt. And I know he does Gaggle Podcast. That's his Pod Fader. He does a show called Pod Fader about how to keep podcasting. Because a lot of people can start one. It's another thing to keep one going. So check him out. I believe it's podfader.com. I know it's GagglePod is his kind of podcast consulting thing that he does. I just love Merchants of Dirt. I think it's like the coolest. And that's all about bike racing and the whole, not so much like how to bike racing, but how to run a race. Just like the behind the scenes of how to organize and run that. So he's a great guy. So yes. Anyway, so John, you mentioned that podcasts sometimes fail. Any failures you want to share that you can politely throw yourself under the bus just a little bit?
Well, okay. The first podcast that I started was a podcast about reversing obesity. That lasted 30 something episodes. And then I couldn't come on air and fail anymore by myself. Then I stopped that. And then I started a comedy podcast with Jessica Kupferman. And then it started to get political and it was tough to do. And it's even worse. So that one went by the wayside. And I went over to your favorite place, Anchor, and started playing around with that. So there's like 4 or 5 podcasts over there with like 2 or 3 episodes on it. So, but I don't consider them failures. I just consider them testing. We're testing things.
There you go. Speaking of testing, I was all excited because I'm not using, in the past, I was using a PreSonus USB interface, cool mixer. It's the AR12. It's still sitting here getting rather dusty. I need to sell this thing. And I always thought that somehow it was the PreSonus. Boy, we are just horrible with the English language today. On a PC, the driver. I thought it was the driver for the mixer that anytime I ever try to use BeLive.tv, all of a sudden I'd be talking and I would just freeze up. And I was like, hey, I'm not using the PreSonus anymore. I'm using a Sound Devices Mix Pre 6. I bet BeLive TV works up. So I just happened to go to the School of Podcasting Facebook group and I'm like, hey, I'm bored. I need a tester. And who jumps in? John Bukenas. And I was like, hey, this is working great. And then all of a sudden in the middle,
I was like, I was talking to myself. I was
yeah.
Like, there you go.
So one of the best things you can do when you're doing anything with new technology or whatever is maybe not do it in front of an audience first, which we were very close. If we had not gone another 5 minutes, I would be probably frozen right now and talking with a weird echo and all sorts of stuff. So we've determined it wasn't the PreSonus. And I think it's basically something on obviously this computer. So for whatever reason, I can't use BeLive.tv at this point. Don't know why. Don't have time to troubleshoot it, which is why we're on Hangouts, and Hangouts works. So have you ever had anything that's just what's your biggest technical like? Ooh,
Oh my goodness. I remember one time, oh, I can't even believe I'm going to talk about this. So we used to do the Brand X podcast in Facebook Live, and we used to have 20, 30 people show up and watch it. And one time I sang a song and I had the music so everybody in the studio could hear it, but the music didn't go into Facebook Live. So I sang, I think, AC/DC
acapella,
right? Which dogs and cats were crying. It was, I can't sing a lick as it is.
Well, and then throw on top AC/DC, not the easiest thing to sing.
I was doing my AC/DC voice, which was horrible.
Fire!
Yeah. I was doing that, and I did the whole song. And afterwards, I looked into chat, and they went no music, and I could feel the blood running out of my face. I thought I was going to pass out. Yeah. Can you hear this music? Yes. Yeah. So I fail horribly in public all the time.
I think one of my favorite fails for me is, this was back in my 20s. I had learned a software that you could make tutorials for. You would basically put it on a CD and you put it in your computer and it would launch like some sort of little tutorial thing. And so I had graduated from college for the first time, and I made this, what I ended up calling it was a digital resume. Then you would put it in and it would launch this little program. It's like, meet Dave Jackson. He's blah, blah, blah. He graduated from Stark State, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Editor of the student newsletter, yada, yada, yada. And then it was like, now let's take a quiz. What is the next step you should do in regards to Dave Jackson? A, call and schedule an interview. B, call and schedule an interview. Or C, call and schedule an interview. So I do this and everybody's like, wow, that was really cool. And it actually did help me get hired. But it was like, you should like sell these things. This was, how hard was it to make? And I'm like, actually, it's really easy. I just have this software and you put it in and blah. So I bought digitalresume.cc for some reason. Apparently digitalresume.com wasn't available. This was, again, way early in the days of Dave and the internet. Didn't do any kind of Google search. And then after I built the website, had everything up, got my PayPal buttons, I'm ready to make my millions. I found the idea. Digital resumes are going to make me rich. And then I actually did a Google search and went, oh, wow, people are actually already doing these. And wow, they're so much better than mine. And in some cases, cheaper than what I want. And I went, oh, this is why I'm probably not going to sell any. So a little market research, not a bad idea. Which is, I'm speaking in Australia in about a week or so. And one of the, I'm doing a thing on the top 10 mistakes that podcasters make, and that's one of them. And there are, I believe, 7 shows named Outside the Box. And I'm like, I find that somewhat ironic that people who want to think outside the box, yet they did not think outside the box when it came to naming the show.
I think there's probably one out there outside the box on fire.
That's it. Oh, there was a guy, I wish I would have written it down, but it was something on fire. And I went to his website. You could only subscribe in Apple Podcasts. There was no Google thing. And I went and listened to it. And he actually was like, hey, I'm high energy Bill, and I'm going to talk with lots of high energy. And today, and he actually said, are you ready to ignite? And I'm like, wait a minute. That's kind of like, let's get ready to rumble. I'm like, that's kind of like that guy's thing. Like, but he said something like, are you ready to ignite about whatever his topic was? So let's say it's the, Bluetooth speaker podcast. Are you ready to ignite about Bluetooth speakers? And I was like, really? Because really? Wow. So yeah, that's not, it's one thing to be inspired. Yeah, but it's another thing to just blatantly rip off. And I was like, yeah. So
I think the one time I went in and I just typed in the search "on fire" and just watched how many podcast titles were on fire. It's amazing.
Yeah, the Steve Stewart and I used to have a list. Let me see if I can find it here real quick, because it was just amazing that you got to be kidding me that it just, here's another one, and then he'd be like 2 days later, here's another one, and it just kept going, and it was, pastors on fire and lawyers on fire and librarian, everybody was on fire, and I was like, do you really think that that's going to be, here we go, podcasts on fire. Let me see if this is the list. Crap, I have links just to their iTunes stuff, but doggone, I know I have it somewhere because we used to have a spreadsheet, but there are a ton, and I just don't think that's going to work. Basically, in a nutshell, it might get you. I mean, let's think about it. Well, there's a band right now, Greta Van Fleet, out of Detroit, and if you listen to them, holy cow, do they sound like Led Zeppelin? I mean, the guy. I'm sorry, but like Robert Plant kind of has like what do you call it? Not a copyright, starts with a T.
Trademark.
You have a trademark. He's trademarked the word mama in rock and roll. Like if you're going, mama, I'm sorry, that's Robert Plant's he's cornered the market on that. And this guy does that. And he's got Robert Plant. And even Robert Plant said, yeah, there's some guy I really like the way he sounds because, it's like that guy's doing me. And it's weird because I'll be interested to see, because their first album did, from what I understand, pretty good, which is weird because Paul McCartney came out with a new album. His last number one album, this tells you what the music industry is like. His last number one album was like 15 years ago. He had 5 million downloads the first week, 5 million sales the first week. His new album just came out, number one, 135,000 sales.
Ooh.
Versus 5 million. So It doesn't take much to get to be number one. So Greta Van Fleet actually got fairly popular because everybody went, wow, they sound like Zeppelin. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not really. They kind of sound like, but so their second album I think is now out. And I'll be interested to see now that the novelty of like, hey, wow, those guys sound a lot like Zeppelin. Do they bring the goods as well? So that'll be fun to watch, because I know a lot of people, it's like I say, it's one thing to be inspired. It's another thing to blatantly rip off. Otherwise, everybody in the 60s would have grown their hair and put on some boots and some suits and been the Beatles, I guess. So
that's true.
Yeah. See, I want to call him Gagglepod. God, what is it with names today?
I see it. This happened to me last night when I couldn't remember Jim Collins' name, and now I gave it to you, and I apologize.
You did. I know Merchants of Dirt. He's got a beard. I can see his face.
Yep, I gave it to you.
Yeah. He said, that's it. He says, I love led Greta Van Zeppelin. They cloned Robert Plant. They did. Absolutely. So, well, you already gave us a tease of She Podcast. Anything else coming up in your neck of the woods that we should know about?
Not really. Just the Hate the Wait that we're doing. I also do a podcast with Jessica Kupferman, Melissa Brilliant. I record it with them and I do the editing, but I'm also on the show, and it's called Brilliant Observations. We have a lot of fun there.
Nice.
So yes,
it's Kyle Bondo. Thank you, Kyle. I'm like, I cannot remember. And he's even got a cool last name, because every time I hear the word Bondo, I think of our 1974 Dodge Duster that, I'm not making this up, was easily 80% Bondo. For those of us that remember Bondo.
Or I used to call Fender in a can.
That was it. Literally, like the car, every Fender was just nothing but Bondo. Exactly. It was awesome. Well, on the School of Podcasting, come out on Monday, I interview Paul Culligan. You are going to want to hear this interview, because he's talking about people that, everybody's like, oh, forget podcasting. Facebook Live is the future. And at least right now, it is so not. And he's got the stats to back it up. I can't wait to hear. I'm actually interviewing him later on today. And we talked over the phone, and what he shared with me, I was like, it just amazing. Like, not only just podcast win, it just like trounces the other one. So that's coming up on the School of Podcasting. We are here every Saturday morning. John, thank you so much for coming on. If you want John to edit your show, check him out over at audioediting.solutions.com. And we're here every Saturday. askthepodcastcoach.com/live. I will be here next week, the 13th. We are probably not having a show on the 20th because I'll be on Australia. Right, crikey. But we'll talk more about that next week. Thanks to the chat room. Again, out at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. And John, I'm just running out of things to say. I have 15 more seconds. I'm just going to fade up the music and dance.